Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down some of my best bets for this upcoming week. We will keep up with that throughout the season and we'll just see how good I can do in this little bet. If you want to follow me, you're more than welcome to. Do not bet any money that you cannot lose. Just plain and simple, do not do that. But at the end of the day, going to be very fun to keep track of, and we'll see if I'm very good at betting or just downright terrible, because I do not know as of right now. But let's get into some questions heading into week 2, and there's so many different things going into week 2, because this is always the week where you kind of figure out who a team is. Week 1 is all about just getting that win, moving on to the next week, and hoping that you're undefeated at the end of it. Week 2 is kind of about showing who you are, showing the way you're going to go about business the rest of the year, and you see a lot of this different kind of oversimplification, not oversimplification, but kind of a regression or progression back to the mean. I couldn't think of another way to put it, but at the end of the day, I do think it's one of those things where you see teams look clunky in week 1, or you see teams look incredible in week 1, and you expect that to happen again in week 2, and then they fall off the face of the earth. It could be Texas falling to Michigan this weekend and maybe looking a little bit clunky on offense. Maybe it's one of those high-powered offensive teams that are doing incredible things like Auburn and Arkansas. Maybe they just fall flat offensively this upcoming weekend. Maybe Tennessee falls to an NC State team that could be able to put them in a precarious situation this upcoming week, and maybe Nico doesn't look like the superhero he looked like in week 1. So it's so many different ridiculous performances in week 1 offensively that I tend to believe that's where you're going to see the biggest step back. You're going to see some of these teams like Alabama and Ole Miss and Auburn and Arkansas and a number of other teams just look a little bit more benign on offense. And some of that is because they're playing better opponents this upcoming week. Some of that is just the reality of college football. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch this one. It's one of those where I think they're going to be able to get a lot of different movement this week. I think there's so many different moments where you look at the game and you think you know what's going to happen, and then things go a little bit of awry. It's one of the things I've talked about throughout this entire week is just this week feels a little bit too straightforward. It feels like everyone's picking Texas to win. Everyone's picking Tennessee to win. Everyone's picking Nebraska to win. And then you're going to show up on Saturday and feel a little bit stupid when some of this stuff goes awry. But it's going to be awesome to watch and see what these guys can do this upcoming week and see if some of these guys take a little bit of a step back in week 2. Also, are we expecting a little bit too much from these young quarterbacks too early? And this is one of those things that I've kind of battled with back and forth early on, at least throughout the last couple of weeks, is you have two massive high-profile night games that are going to have two quarterbacks that everyone wants to see in prime time so badly, and Dylan Raiola and Nico Iamaleava. Everyone wants to see those guys go to work. Could one of them stumble? I think it's one of those things where we have all this expectation, all of this love for these young guys, but this is still new territory for both of these guys, and it's going to be really awesome to see how they react to it. And normally I would say yes. I think there's a number of examples where you have a guy that comes out of the gate really fast but is really young and then walks into a really tough environment and it looks really weird. It looks clunky, it looks bad, and I think it's happened all across pretty much every single year of college football. And I think you look at those two guys and it's easy to see that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen on Saturday, but these guys are different. And I can't really quantify it. I can't really explain it. But Dylan Raiola walking out onto that field on Saturday, and I get it was UTEP, don't get me wrong, but walking out onto that field, 100,000 people there to see him. No confusion about that. They were there to see Dylan Raiola in his very first game in Big Red. And he was able to deliver, and he didn't look phased. It wasn't like one of those games where he made a couple of big plays but looked clunky at times. The kid was on money every single time, and it was one of those things where it really opens your eyes to just how much confidence some of these kids have. And I think you look at it on the other side with Nico, he can rip the ball all around the field. And I don't think he's a guy that plays the game remotely scared. And I think it's one of those things where the only way that he could go awry this weekend is if Josh Heupel doesn't believe that he can deliver. If Josh Heupel kind of pulls him away from passing the ball downfield as aggressively and being as aggressive down the field as they want to, because I think that could take him out of a rhythm. And I think this is very much a rhythm quarterback that if you get him throwing those rhythm routes, those timing routes, he's going to tear you to pieces. So it's one of those things where I understand these two guys are going into some big-time areas on Saturday night. They're going to be really under a big-time spotlight. But at the end of the day, both these guys are so steely-eyed demeanor, is so confident, such have this ability to not only, take the pressure but thrive off of it, that I'm having a hard time poking holes. Maybe I feel differently on Monday. Maybe they showed me a couple of holes that I don't necessarily love. But as of right now, I think these two guys are just built a little bit differently than normal people and have the ability to totally take over this weekend. The other question I have is one that's been nagging at me all week. Are we writing off Michigan a little bit too fast? I understand everyone wants to. With all of the stuff happening off the field, there's plenty of people that want to see this Michigan, I'm not going to say dynasty, obviously, but this Michigan run come to an end. Everyone wants to see it. Everyone wants to see them fall. But the reality of this team is they are built on some of the most solid foundation of any team in the entire country. When you can run the ball the way that they can, when you're going to be physical at the point of attack, and when you can play defense, you're going to be able to win a lot of games. That's just the plain truth of college football, especially when a lot of people cannot do that by any means. So whether it's Will Johnson or Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant, you have to be able to get enough from your defense throughout this year to be in these games. That doesn't mean that Michigan can't play good football, though. I think one of the big misconceptions with this team is, yes, the offense did take a step back, and you could argue the defense took a slight step back, although I think they're roughly on the same plane as they were a year ago. I think it's one of those things where you're just going to have to get more dynamic, whether that's getting Donovan Edwards in interesting situations out on the edge by himself, or using Alex Orji more, which I expect to see a lot more of this weekend. And I think it's one of those moments where Michigan has the ability this week to just prove everyone wrong, to just show everyone that it wasn't about Connor Stalions, it wasn't about Jim Harbaugh, it wasn't about any of that stuff. It was about us. It was about us being the better team on the field, and I think it's going to be a fight, no doubt about it. I do think Texas wins this game, but I think Michigan shows that they're not a team that is going to just fade away into nothingness. They're going to be a team that is going to be tough to beat every single week. Maybe they're not explosive on offense. Maybe they don't absolutely terrify you like the team last year, but they're absolutely a team that can make some noise, and even if they lose this weekend, can be a team that at the end of the year is very much in the playoff conversation. So I just want to make sure everyone is not writing them off too early just because of some of the emotions of what happened last year, just more than anything else. The other part of this, apologies there. The other part of this is, does Oregon have real issues, or do they have temporary issues? Because there is an argument to be made for both of them, if I'm being totally honest. In the game in week one, everything was all over the place. I talked about it earlier. I do expect them to win big this game, but it doesn't mean some of those problems can't linger. When you talk about Dylan Gabriel, they had explosivity with Bo Nix. That was what they did. They ran the ball really effectively. They got Bo Nix in the run game. And then they said, when your safeties come down into the box, we're going to throw over top of you. That was kind of their big equalizer in a lot of these games where maybe things weren't going perfectly, but if you can run the ball just a little bit, then Bo Nix can hit that big play. Dylan Gabriel's not going to be able to do that, at least not to the same degree that Bo Nix did, because he doesn't have as big of an arm. He's more of a put it where it needs to be, execute the offense type quarterback, rather than this game-breaking quarterback like Bo Nix was a year ago. So I think it's one of those things where you just have to see more from him. It doesn't have to be, 50 or 5 50-yard plays, tons of touchdowns, win by 25 points, but it does have to be efficient. It does have to be push the ball downfield just a little bit more, and I think that's something that can be handled, but might be something they have to deal with throughout this entire year, just finding a way to put together a game plan that puts Dylan Gabriel in good positions to win, rather than saying, we're just going to push the ball downfield because that's what we like to do. And then the other part of this is the O-line, and this is one that I tend to believe is going to be fixed a little bit easier, because I think when Matthew Bedford comes back, it's going to kind of take that pseudo Jackson Powers Johnson situation where you have that interior guy to get that initial push, because that's really all you need is have one guy on that interior to get that initial push, and then the other guys are going to be able to do it. So it's one of those things where I don't love where the O-line is right now. I think when Matthew Bedford comes back, it's going to be a lot better, but it's still a big-time question mark. There's no two ways about that. But then, who walks out of this week with a Heisman favorite? Who is the guy that we walk out of this weekend saying, that's the guy as of right now, he is the number one player on that leaderboard, and we'll see what happens? For me, Quinn Ewers is the easiest answer. If he can go up to Ann Arbor and put together a ridiculous performance and win that game, there's almost no doubt in my mind that he's going to be the guy that everyone's talking about for the Heisman on Monday. But you talk about some of the other guys that have the opportunity, Nico Iamaleava obviously has a huge shot this weekend, where you have an NC State defense, particularly a back end, that you might be able to take advantage of. If he can put up numbers like he did a week ago, it's going to be people going over the moon to put this kid in the Heisman race. And frankly, I would be as well. So I'd be right there with him. But the other way you could go is the guys over in Colorado. There are two guys that in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter that can totally change this week and become those players that maybe Dion gets his wish and they're the number 1 and 2 guys on that list on Monday. But at the end of the day, I think these are guys that can totally change the complexion of this game. And particularly Travis Hunter, if he can take things over, is going to be the guy that you look at and say, if he's not the number 1 guy in the Heisman race, we're doing something wrong. And then finally, I wanted to get into something that I've seen floating around the college football Twitter space this week. Is this a weak slate? And it makes me mad kind of saying it, I'll be totally honest with you. But the reality is, there's no such thing. This is college football. Anytime you get to watch college football on a Saturday, you are winning. I don't care if it is a D2 matchup. I don't care if it's a D3 matchup. I don't care if it's high school teams playing with college jerseys on. This is college football. Every time we get to line up on Saturdays, it is a special thing. So whether or not you get all of the incredible games you want, whether or not you think Michigan and Texas is the only big-time marquee game, I don't care. This is college football. Strap them up, get your TVs on. You're going to enjoy this day because honestly, if I told you in June that we're going to have the Cy-Hawk Trophy on the way, we're going to have Colorado, Nebraska, we're going to have two very high-powered offenses in Tennessee, NC State, and we're going to have two teams that were in the playoff a year ago going at it, you would hug me, and you would be so excited about that happening. So don't take this week any differently. Don't take this week as one that you can take a little bit of time off. You can, walk away for the 3:30 slate, come back for the night slate. College football always finds a way, whether it's a week slate or whatever. Week slates don't exist in college football because the second that you think you have a week slate, a lot of stuff happens that makes it very not weak in a hurry. So I think it's one of those weeks that you figure out how much people really love college football. I think there are a number of people that are saying this is not a very strong week. You really only have Texas, Michigan, maybe Colorado and Nebraska will be fun, but at the end of the day, there's not too much on the schedule. There's plenty on the schedule because at the end of the day, there's college football on the schedule, and that's all you need. I don't care what level you're playing at. I don't care how well you're playing. I'm going to be tuned in on Saturday, and I'm going to be watching every single second of it because you only get so many of these Saturdays every year. Take advantage of every single last one of them, even if the slate doesn't grab you quite as much. And I understand the slate isn't quite as strong as some will have down the road, but it's still college football. They still got some incredible games on Saturday, so I don't want to hear any more of that. There's no such thing as a weak slate in college football. If I hear that one more time this year, I'm going to be really mad. We have to make sure that college football is one of those things where it doesn't matter who's playing, doesn't matter when they're playing, doesn't matter how it shakes out. We are locked in because college football is college football. That's all I need. So it's one of those things that just wanted to get that off my chest. Felt like I had to say that. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a weekend headline wrap-up. A number of things happening all around the country that I want to make sure I get on y'all's radar. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.